Welcome to the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen, covering the week that was in professional wrestling. Hey, it's Juice Springsteen. Damn. Wait a second. That's his thing. Welcome to a very special Sip Series edition of the Juice Box. And without further ado, my guest for the Sip Series this time around is a man who helped Tony Schiavone come back to wrestling, a man who stepped on an incredibly rare LJN Kamala action figure mask owned by Matt Cardona, and a man who has more wrestling podcasts than Mercedes Moné has belts. He is the Podfather, Conrad Thompson. Welcome to the Juice Box, man. How are you doing today?
I'm great, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come on with you. It's my honor.
It's an honor to talk to you, man. I mean, I would be lying if I said that this show couldn't be possible without your shows and your love for pro wrestling.
Well, thank you.
It's infectious the way that you talk to people and can get anything out of the people that had cobwebs about wrestling. Like they came back, and I feel like you're definitely a part of the inspiration to say, hey, there are a lot of people that like pro wrestling, and if you're willing to get people to come back or talk about it, why can't I? So I'm happy to have you on today, and let's just get right into it if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So when did you first ever get introduced to pro wrestling as a youth, as you might say? What was the first thing that you recall?
I would think it was probably the summer of 1988. This is the first major memory I have. We lived in Prattville, Alabama, which is sort of like, I don't know, the south central part of the state. And my grandfather lived in Gunnersville, which is actually where I live now. And so we came to visit him, and my parents back then, like a lot of parents, would take the kids to the video store. Not a Blockbuster. We didn't have very many of those chains in Alabama, but maybe like a movie gallery. And that kind of became the babysitter. And my parents saw a double tape VHS with Hulk Hogan on the front. Of course, I'm talking about WrestleMania 4. And they said, "Oh, let's get this for him." And boy, were they right. When I slid that tape in, Hulk Hogan was the live action version of He-Man for me, and I was all in.
Isn't that crazy that you're like, that was the babysitter, and I feel like it's been replaced with the iPad?
Oh, for sure. That's 100% accurate. Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I mean, that's one hell of a babysitter, though. I wouldn't mind sitting through a tournament style pay-per-view for the WWF title to start off my night.
No, sign me up, dude.
Absolutely. So that being your first memory, how did that transform into more? Like, were you wanting to watch more, finding more? And you did bring up your parents there. Were they fans of wrestling? Did they enjoy it? Like, how did that progress from a babysitter, as you said, to, well, what about this show, or how can I find more?
Yeah, I certainly started finding it on the weekends. I started to wonder when it came on TV, and back then you had to either have a TV guide or get the newspaper. So my parents found the Saturday morning opportunities, and eventually we discovered Saturday night's main event, and that kind of became a family affair. My parents never really, they were always the people who in the South, we would work in the yard. So mom and dad were always working in the flower beds or playing around the pool or whatever it may be. My entire life, they were doing outdoor stuff. And usually my dad worked on Saturdays until the afternoon. So we were kind of by ourselves, me, mom, and my sister on Saturday morning. So mom would start, cleaning up around the house and doing laundry and that sort of stuff. And she would plop us down in front of the TV. And I was the older brother, so I got the remote, and we would choose to watch WWF Superstars or WCW Pro or Power Hour or Main Event, one of those syndicated programs. And then eventually, once I discovered Saturday night's Main Event, it became a family affair. I remember staying up late and watching that with my mom and dad and sister. And even I had an uncle and his girlfriend at the time, later wife, would come over and watch with us. And it was a challenge for, a 7 and 8 year old. Can he stay up until 10:35 at night? But I did it, and it was fantastic. And one thing led to another, and I started convincing my parents to get a pay-per-view. So we would get the WWF pay-per-views and my dad would record them on a VHS. And then a guy he worked with at the prison system, because my dad was a prison guard, he and his family would get the NWA pay-per-views and they would record those. So I usually saw NWA pay-per-views on Monday night, and I saw the night after the pay-per-view if it was on a Sunday night. And yeah, that became the pattern. And then I remember giving up on wrestling around SummerSlam 92. That was like one of the first major pay-per-views that I just wasn't super into. And my fandom kind of dwindled from there. And I remember seeing Hulk Hogan come out on Monday Night Raw. I happened to be in the hospital as a little kid getting my tonsils and adenoids removed, so I had to stay overnight. But that's probably the last time I saw wrestling or cared about wrestling until late August 1996. I'm flipping through the channels, and I see Hulk Hogan standing there in all black with what looks like Vinny Vegas and the Diamond Stud. But I had missed all of Diesel and Razor Ramon because I hadn't been watching. And I thought, hey, what is this? Well, if he's over here in WCW, what's happening on the WWF? And that's when I saw that one half of the Rockers was now the world champion and Vader was over there. So I had a lot of catching up to do, but I was all in.
Wow, that's so wild that of like the progression of SummerSlam 92 was like the first pay-per-view without Hogan, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
So that's like a clear fall off point. And then lo and behold, the next time you see him, he's in WCW and things are just like flipped on its head.
Hulk Hogan is the reason I'm a wrestling fan. He was my first introduction to it. You know, as a little kid, I was all about G.I. Joe and He-Man. Yeah. Like those are my two things. And I just thought this was way cooler than cartoons. This is live action. And, you know, by that point, I had certainly started playing football and grew into being a real big fan of that. So I'm collecting baseball cards and football cards. And then I fell in love with Shaquille O'Neal, like that 92, 93 season. So that stuff just really captivated my attention. You have to appreciate 92. You were competing with a little kid who played football in Alabama because Alabama won the national title. My parents have all been lifelong Cowboy fans. The Cowboys won the Super Bowl.
Wow.
You know, and you've also got, you know, when you're taking a look at other sports, because football's obviously religious, you know, almost in Alabama, but LSU had this kid who was going to get drafted by the Magic who was literally larger than life. And that was one of the things I liked about pro wrestling is these larger than life characters. And it was really hard to avoid paying attention to Shaquille O'Neal. So Shaq, Alabama winning the national championship, the Cowboys winning, Hulk Hogan not being there, I was ready to move on.
Isn't that crazy too that Shaq was at Bash to the Beach 94?
It's crazy.
It's all this stuff ties in. And it honestly still doesn't seem real that Hogan's no longer with us. It's wild that, like, you think about it, like, oh, he'll just come out he'll be at WrestlePalooza, you know? And it's like, no, like, it's surreal to say the least. So you say WrestleMania 4 was probably that first show you recall. What about live? What was the first show you ever got to attend live, if you remember?
Well, I know that I went to some Prattville independent shows, but my first WCW shows would have been in Montgomery. I would hit TV tapings at the Coliseum there. WWE has ran a lot of house shows there, but WCW used to do their syndicated TV shows, and you would watch one show after another. And I remember one of those, we showed up early and I got to meet Z-Man, which was kind of neat. So somewhere there's a Polaroid of me meeting Z-Man. Mom's got it somewhere. And my first WWF show, we still lived in South Alabama at the time, but we were on the floor about 9 rows back, and they did a house show here in 1990. And the main event was Dusty Rhodes and the Macho King. So we drove, I guess, 2.5 hours, probably 2.5 hours to come see that show. But it was a big deal. And, you know, I started attending some more WCW TV tapings, but I don't know that I saw any in 92. And if I did, certainly not past, say, June, because by August, I was kind of over it.
Which is also crazy because the roster in 92 for WCW is like a murder.
Unbelievable. Yeah. But to me as a kid, they were they were second fiddle. Now I go back, I fall back in love with wrestling in late 96 and I start doing a lot of tape trading. And now I'm just trying to catch up on everything I missed, really. And I fell in love with WCW and it was fantastic stuff. But as a little kid, man, it was just WWF or nothing for me.
It's the Coca-Cola, it's the Kleenex of,
Yes.
of wrestling. Um, I just wow, that's that's such a cool way to have like gone from that, and you said 2.5 hour drive. Do you ever think that the dedication to even doing that for those shows would have ever turned into what you're currently doing and what you've been doing for the last several years?
No, and if I'm honest with you, I've been in the sales industry my whole life. My dad was a salesperson and my my mom's dad was a salesperson and his kid was a salesperson. So I've just always been raised around sales. And so in sales, man, you kind of live and die by your month. So certainly if you're all commission, you're trying to figure out how much money you can make for your family this month. And then you sort of reset and start and do it all over again next month. And some people find that to be almost like a rat wheel, but I actually find it to be motivational because if you have a bad month, the good news is you can have a good month next month. So I've always, I spend very little time on my successes and I spend more time trying to focus on the failures and trying to get better. And I don't know that it's brought me as much peace and contentment as I probably should have. But I mean, even through this wrestling journey, like when I'm doing something and I'm having fun with it, my brain can't help but think about, okay, what's next? What are we doing next? Where are we going next? And so sometimes, I will be reflective and think a little bit like, if I would have told 11-year-old me what I'm doing now, I mean, just the absurdity that there is a pro wrestling hall of fame that I'm in there and my name is on the list and I'm somehow married to Ric Flair's daughter. And I went to a business lunch a couple of weeks ago and I came out and I had a voicemail from Sting. Like, what? What's happening? It can be very surreal at times. But so much of it has just become at this point, if I'm honest, it's just Tuesday. And I try not to allow that to be the case because I don't want to take it for granted because I know this will end. Either
Sure.
I'll get bored or the world will get bored of me and this will end. So I'm trying to make the most of it. I think there's a great line from The Office, and I'm trying to be thankful for the good old days while I'm still in them.
Yeah, and that's a wonderful way to look at it where sure there's good and there's bad, but there's, as long as you're still breathing, there's always that next thing and like
That's right.
what's that gonna give me? What can I give back to it? And just keep on going because we're all just cogs in the machine.
Yes.
So just touch back on how you got through. You said your dad was always in sales. Take me through just the progression of, I guess, just through your school career, like through high school. I'm not sure if did you go to college. I really don't know much of this stuff outside of the wrestling realm and what I've
Sure.
done on my own research. So kind of take me through going through schooling and how it got you to your main gig, and then how that kind of transitioned to where you are now.
Well, I always got good grades in school, mostly out of fear for my parents. There was nothing my parents could do or say that would be more important to me than telling me they were proud of me or conversely that they were disappointed.
That's
Like,
awesome.
that I wanted to avoid that. And so I had a lot of pressure on me, not necessarily put by them, but just pressure I put on myself to do well. So I always got A's. And, if I got A's and B's, I was very disappointed. I think I had one C in my entire school career and it felt like the end of the world. But I was just struggling with that subject, but we fixed it. As a little kid, I had a real bad speech impediment. I had a terrible stutter and had to go to speech classes and work through all of that. And then I started playing football, and somehow, I guess maybe through hanging around with my dad and busting balls, I became like the class clown, and so I could pretty much go sit at any lunch table just because I knew how to be self-deprecating and how to be funny without hurting people's feelings, and but I also knew how to turn the volume on, and sometimes maybe I would take it too far. And then I guess they nominated me to be a part of what they called Madison County, or I'm sorry, Marshall County Youth Leadership. So that was like you had to, pass a certain level or threshold academically. And then you had to do a series of interviews and just show that you could be personable and welcoming and that sort of thing. And they picked 4 kids from all the high schools in Marshall County, and our local community college, Snead State Community College, gave those kids, if they were willing to serve as an ambassador for the Marshall County Youth Leadership, that you would get a full ride, as silly as that sounds. It's a 2-year community college. But I had seen my parents go from, personal bankruptcy and real tough financial times to my dad quitting the prison system and his part-time job of sales becoming a full-time job in sales. And our life changed. We went from renting to owning a pretty nice house, the nicest house in our family at least. And it had a lot of land with it relative to the way we had grown up. And it had they put in a big L-shaped huge swimming pool and a detached garage, and mom had the new Lincoln Navigator. And oh my God, we're going to Disney World. I mean, I'm a little old for this, but this is kind of cool. So I saw just how our life changed through financial success. And I just decided, hey, man, this is what I want to do. And so once upon a time, I thought, I wanted to be like an investment banker or, I was the kid who also rode the church bus to school. Nobody else in my family went to church, and it just wasn't a priority. They would watch on TV, but they didn't feel the need to attend services. So I kind of thought I might be a youth minister. I just thought I wanted to have a meaningful impact on the world, but I was also interested in finance and wanted people to not have the stress that I saw my family have. That was sort of the thinking I had. And then my dad achieved real sales success. I mean, we went from barely paying the bills to well into the 6 figures, and I saw the change it had on their life. And I was like, hey, man, I'm doing this. I want to continue. I want to do for my family what dad has done for ours. I mean, it was a real turnaround. So I never even applied to another college because Snead State Community College was in our community, and I knew I could work in the family business and make a really good living very quickly. And at the same time, I could, still be around mom and dad and learn from dad. Dad's always kind of been my sales hero and the person I look up to, and have tried to, he's been my model for what a man should be. I mean, he's been married to my mom since April of 1980. That neither ever slept outside of their own home, like not one night without the other person. And they've just been like the model relationship I've sort of, grown up with. So I've always tried to be close with my parents and take care of my family, and they take care of me, and vice versa. So I just decided early on, I'm not even going to consider going to another school. And now, with the benefit of hindsight, I regret that I didn't have that college experience. There was so much of my life that, I mean, as soon as I started working when I was 14 in the family biz and sales, at the time I was in the phone room, but once I could actually drive, I was, on the road selling, and then won some training awards when I was like 18. So I was kind of good at it very quickly. But, yeah, one day in community college, Van Scott, who was my business teacher, I think it was September or maybe October, he said, hey, some of you, if you keep your head down and keep your nose clean in 5 years, you can make up to $35,000 a year. And at the end of class, I went and saw him, and I said, hey, I think I'm gonna drop it. And he says, you're gonna drop the class? And I said, no, I think I'm gonna quit school. I think I'm done. And he's like, well, why would you do that? And I said, well, you made a comment and you said if I keep my head down and keep my nose clean, in 5 years I could make up to 35,000. He goes, yeah, wouldn't that be nice? And I handed him my paycheck stub. It was September or October, but I'd already made 60 grand. And he
Wow.
looked at it and he looked up at me and he said, hey, you make more than me. Why are you here? And patted me on the shoulder. And I was like, okay, so that solidified it. So I quit school and I moved from Gunnersville to Huntsville because, hey, if you're going to be in sales, you got to go where the people are.
Yeah.
And there's a lot more people in Huntsville. I mean, even now, I bet Gunnersville has like 12,000 people in it. So, and that's where I live. I moved back there, but I still work in Huntsville because, hey, that's where the people are. So the course of my life was kind of charted early on, and I am a little regretful that I never tried the college experience because
Yeah.
I'd say when I was 24, 25, I really started. I made up for lost time in my
Yeah.
college time.
Wow. I mean, that's the little part that I take from that I can at least relate to is my parents have been together since 92. So
Yeah.
they've been, long term marriage just like doesn't happen as often, I feel like anymore. And it's nice to see that the structure of that can help you or someone like me just look, they could do it, stay dedicated to it, and they took care of you. You can take care of them, and you're always, very family oriented. And I really like respect that because it's just not the norm. I would say as time progresses, I've have plenty of friends that they're divorced or multiple marriages or the parents aren't there, and it's not that those guys or girls that are, lesser off or worse off or anything, but it's nice to have the stability because it gives you like a framework of, hey, I can do this. I've seen it be done before, even at the worst of times.
Well, it also teaches you, I think, how to be a little less selfish,
Yeah.
and that's really hard today in 2025 for a lot of people to wrap their head around. Hey, not everything is about you,
Yeah.
and there's more to this world than just the way you feel. And I don't feel like we always have to share what we're thinking all the time. And sometimes it's okay to say less. And, that's hard right now, especially when there's so much political divide in our country. It feels like everybody feels like their opinion is most important. And that's not to say that everybody's voice isn't important, but if you're trying to make a marriage work, a real interpersonal and romantic, I mean, the base of it, at least in my experience, is a friendship. This has got to
Yeah.
be somebody that you want to spend, really all of your free time with. And that's hard. I mean, their familiarity breeds, contempt. And so, you've got to navigate all of that and not get bored and give people the benefit of the doubt and have a little grace and have a lot of patience. And I don't know. I just think I learned a lot of lessons from watching my parents do that and have tried to apply some of that not only in my personal life but in my professional life. And I think I've been well served by doing that. I think.
And I think the pro wrestling world has been served better with people like you in it, Conrad. So
Well,
I
thank you
think
for saying that. I appreciate that.
absolutely it definitely comes off that you're currently paying it forward as you're also currently doing it. Like it's you're kind of serving both masters by doing what you can now, but it's also laying framework for, I don't know, countless other people that have done stuff with you, or like again, people like me inspired by people like you to do things that maybe they're not too comfortable with, or just taking that extra step. So to
Good for
get
you
to
too, dude. Just to put yourself out there. That's the
yeah,
that's the first big step that people struggle with. People ask me all the time, "Hey, I want to do a podcast. Help me do a podcast." And I'm like, guys, it doesn't really work like that. It's super easy.
yeah,
You just start doing stuff. I know that sounds simple, but you just start doing stuff and you'll find what you're good at and what you like. And you'll also find what you're not good at and what you don't like, and do more of what you're good at and you like and less of what you're not good at and you don't like. And that's the formula. You don't have to overthink it. And I think it's super cool that, you're having fun doing it. That's the idea, man. Let's have some fun.
and that's exactly how I wanted to do this like separate show, is because I was on Chair Shot Reality with Justin LeBar back in the day, and I was just a figurehead on the show, but I never had to produce anything, never had to do anything on my own other than just be on the show. So when that program ended, I just felt like a void of like, I want to talk about wrestling, but I gotta like do it on my own. Like no one's just gonna say, "Oh, I remember you." Like no one remember. It's pro wrestling. There's a million podcasts out there, and you got to just kind of do it on your own. And I figured, well, I can. Let me just start it. So
Good
that's
for you.
where, yeah, thank you. So that's where seeing where you were, and again, we'll talk about it here in a moment with what happened when, and something to wrestle. Those types of shows, I'm like, these are long form, but they're just like guys talking about wrestling, and like that's all I really want to do is just like BS about wrestling with people I'm comfortable with, or like-minded individuals such as yourself. And it's really like nice to have that, and it's nice to build that community interspersed with your real life. So this is a great hobby to have. So
I
appreciate
totally agree.
it. Yeah.
Well said.
So getting into the podcasting game, just you can tie this however you want, and kind of go through the storyline and time frame of it. But how surreal is it for when the first time you ever had a conversation with Ric Flair, and now he's your father-in-law. Get me through that.
Well, I met Rick when he was respectfully fresh out of rehab. You know, he had gone off the deep end after Reed passed away, understandably. I mean, that's
Sure.
something that I hope nobody ever has to really experience in their life. I mean, nobody should have to bury their kid. And I can imagine, you know, how that sent him over the edge. So he's on the mend after that and trying to get his feet underneath him and put his life back together. And he's making appearances. And he had one in Rome, Georgia. And so I wound up meeting him through that appearance, and we just hit it off and we exchanged numbers. And I guess that was maybe November of 2013 or December of 2013. And we just became texting friends. And in February, he invited me to his birthday party. So I went, and I had dad tag along with me. And he's like, I don't really understand why we're going to this. And I'm like, well, if I'm honest with you, I don't either. But hypothetically, if Joe Namath or Bear Bryant invited you to their birthday, would we go? And he goes, well, hell yeah. And I go, so come ride with me. So we went and we got to meet everybody, and it was a nice experience. And then he invited me to WrestleMania. And so WrestleMania was in New Orleans, and I already had a hotel room and I already had tickets. So I said, well, hell yeah. So that was my first time going backstage to WrestleMania, and he introduced me to everyone from Stone Cold to The Rock to Roddy Piper. And I got pictures with all those guys, and Ric Flair was the cameraman. So it was kind of surreal to be backstage at WrestleMania
Crazy.
30. Like, this is unbelievable. And then we wound up watching the NFL draft together. And the next thing I know, you know, one day we're in Nashville, which is not too far from where I live, a little under 2 hours. And he was doing like a celebrity waiter thing at the Palm restaurant called Waiting for Wishes. And he was someone's celebrity waiter. And I went, and I was going to spend the night, and we were going to have fun in Nashville. And then we did. And then the next morning, he's hanging out before he has to jump on a plane. And he said, hey, my agent, Melinda at the time, has an offer from CBS to do a podcast. What is a podcast? And I had to explain it to him. And he pulled his phone out of his pocket and he said, can you show me on my phone? So I showed him, you know, where it was and how all that works. Then he goes, can you make any money doing that? How does that work? So I just explained the process to him. And he said, well, see, man, that's what he calls me. What do you think? Is this something I could make money with? And I go, yeah. Roddy Piper's got one. And if he can have a successful one, so can Ric Flair. So he said, okay, I'm going to do it. So he got in touch with his agent. His agent closed the deal with CBS. And then they set the first recording date, and he was going to have Harley Race as his first guest. And a couple of days beforehand, he called me kind of in a panic, and he said, hey, I'm nervous about this podcast thing. And I said, what do you mean? And he goes, well, they've got a studio for me in downtown Atlanta, but I just can't wrap my head around what it's going to be like. And I'm like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, it's just going to be me in a room with a microphone. I don't know how to make that entertaining. I need to play off of somebody. Can you come to Atlanta and just ask me fan questions? And I'm like, yeah, of course. I'd be delighted to. So I had done radio here in Alabama because I had been advertising my mortgage company, doing live morning spots and live afternoon spots. So when Rick and I would travel together for the first few months of our friendship, you know, like I think the first wrestling show he took me to was in St. Louis. Either way, I had gotten in a rhythm traveling with him, and he knew that at certain times of the morning or certain times of the afternoon, I'd have to step away and say, hang on one second. And I would be live on the radio promoting my mortgage company. So he had heard me do that, and he knew that I knew how to do radio, but I don't think he knew that, like, our local sports and political affiliates, whenever they would have one of their hosts on vacation, I would be like a stand-in host. They needed someone to guest host so they didn't have to play a best of, because these are like call-in type shows, and they needed someone who could just play traffic cop and not make it just a long ass infomercial. So I had done that before. So when I showed up to the studios on Peachtree in downtown Atlanta for CBS, I had like show prep. and multiple pages in big fonts in bold for the highlights, and things were highlighted. And I passed, gave one to the producer and one to Rick. And the guy behind the board was like, "Who are you and what is this?" And I'm like, Rick asked me to come in and ask fan questions. He had not told Seth or any of the crew there that I was going to be a part of the show. So they pot up another mic. And as it worked out, Harley's connection on the phone was really, really bad. And he wasn't as sharp mentally as we maybe expected. So it wound up never airing. But what did air is he and I just talking. And because I'd never done a podcast before either. I was doing like radio billboards, just reminding people what they're listening to as if they were changing the channels. Cause hell, I didn't know what I was doing either. And at the end of the episode, Seth from CBS said, "Hey man, that was pretty good. Can you come back next week?" So I went from, "Hey, what the hell is this guy doing here? He's ruining the Ric Flair show," to, "Hey, that was kind of good. Can you do it again next week?" So I got in a rhythm of popping over to Atlanta once a week and doing a podcast, and it was a blast. And I guess maybe a month in, it sort of clicked for me. Hey, I've been spending a lot of money to advertise my mortgage company on the radio and TV in North Alabama and Middle Tennessee. But everybody who has a phone globally can hear this podcast. Not saying everyone's listening, but I have a big audience that's listening to a podcast I'm on, and I haven't tried to sell them a mortgage not one time. So I decided, you know what? I need to get my shit together, as I say. And I expanded my licensing footprint. So instead of having like 8 states, I got like 48 states, and it took a while. And then I realized, hey, I just reverse engineered my new advertising method. So I was spending over $1 million a year in advertising that I quit spending. Like I cut it off. I mean, I was probably down to 60,000 a year, and I just went all in on pods. And that is the reason I spun up something to wrestle, and then what happened when, and then 83 weeks and grilling JR, because I had been advertising on radio and TV through a variety of different methods. The ABC affiliate, the CBS affiliate. Let me get the news. Let me get live sports. I definitely want college football. Give me some NFL. Hey, I'll try some racing. But I was looking for live programming so people couldn't DVR me and just fast forward my commercials. But then once I understood the power of the reach of the podcast, I was able to grow my mortgage company 7,000%.
That's
So
crazy.
as well as I did in podcasting, I did much, much better in mortgages, and it changed mine and my family's life forever. So I found a way to sort of dovetail my two passions together. I love the wrestling that I grew up on, and I love the nostalgia. Like the music I listen to in my car is old music. The movies I watch when I'm bored are old movies. The TV shows that I'll go back and binge are old TV shows. Like, The Naked Gun, the day it came out, I wanted to see that. I'm just Mr. Nostalgia. I love all that stuff. Can't get enough of it. And one of the, I think everybody who gets in a relationship, one of the things they want to do is they want to sort of share some of the content that helps shape who they are. So it was exciting to show Megan movies that she had never seen before that meant a lot to me. And now it's exciting to show the girls, hey, you're adults now. Here's one of my favorite movies you've never seen, blah, blah, blah. So that's the thinking that made me think, hey, selling wrestling nostalgia. I know people think it's wrestling content, and it is, but really it's nostalgia. And we all have these little touch points, if so to speak, about certain things. Like Hulk Hogan makes me think of my grandfather's townhouse, because that's the first place I saw him. And
Yeah.
I remember, I remember being with my grandmother on the way to the Shrimp Festival when I got my first WCW magazine in '96, and I could see Hulk Hogan in all black. And I'm just saying, everybody has a reason that they remember wrestling so fondly. And I don't think most people like you and I, as much as we love wrestling today, I don't know that we honestly and truly love it as much as we did in our first 10 years of our fandom. And I think
Yeah.
that first 10 years of our fandom, we sort of gravitate to, which is why I think so many people celebrate the golden era, and then later the attitude era, and now the ruthless aggression era is going
Yeah.
through a celebration right now. I think it's all just about the timing of when we grew up. That's what we just remember so fondly. So the idea that I get to talk about these fond memories of something I was obsessed with, and I've dovetailed that into my passion now of helping people save money and create wealth for their family through home ownership and all of that stuff, finding a way for those two things to match. Old school wrestling and mortgages on the surface makes no sense, but I made it work, and it was the thrill of my life to be able to do so.
And for the thrill of your life to be so damn successful is like a great extra bonus, you
Yes.
know?
Yes.
Like, it's gotta feel great to have been like, "Well, I'm gonna do this." And now it's like, "I'm so glad I did this. Look at all these things that have come from this that you probably thought, like, the success was there or it could be achieved, but to the level that it's been, I don't know if anybody could see that, and just assume that's gonna happen."
Me, most of all, there's no way I would have imagined it this way or drawn it up this way. It was just, when I tell the story of how I got with Rick on a podcast, I call myself an accidental podcaster. It wasn't with intent. And in a weird way, I think, I have, I don't know, grown out of some of my wrestling fandom as far as like collecting things because I went
Yeah.
through huge collector phases. But I think the thing I'm hesitant to ever even consider selling because I got an offer that was 3 times what I paid for my first house this year for the big gold belt, and I didn't even hesitate and turned it down. And I think a lot of that is because the acquisition of that belt sort of changed the trajectory of my fandom and where I'm at in my life in a weird way. Because I don't know if I hadn't found a Ric Flair robe on eBay that I would have gotten back into wrestling. Because once I bought the thing, I was like, well, let me just see what's going on now. And I did. And that was around the same time that CM Punk did his pipe bomb promo. And interestingly enough, he did that promo on my 30th birthday when I was in Las Vegas with my buddies, but we had no idea WWE was there, nor did we care. We weren't watching wrestling in 2011.
11, yeah.
But that, June 27th, 2011 is when I turned 30. So I'm out there having fun with my buddies, doing what you would imagine we were doing. And it's like everybody's talking about this on social media. Let me check it out. And the next time I found myself in Vegas, I was thinking about that promo and how it had popped off. And I just thought, I really got knee deep in collecting. So I have like Ali gloves and trunks and Tyson gloves and trunks and a bunch of old jerseys. And I've got like a man cave at my Huntsville house. And I just thought, man, how cool would it be if I had something from wrestling? And then it goes, well, what would be like the coolest wrestling thing to have? And it was a Ric Flair robe. I sort of thought it was like, an Elvis jumpsuit. If you could have that and display that, that'd be like the coolest thing. So once I got it, then it's like, okay, now what's like the Heisman Trophy, if you will, of
Oh,
pro
yeah.
wrestling? And it was the big gold belt. And so one day I'm scrolling through Dave Milliken's website and I'm trying to find what belt I want to order to put on a mannequin with this Ric Flair robe. Because once you have the robe, it's like, all right, now that I got it, and that was a really fun deal to get it. How the hell do you display this thing? Like, what do you do with it? It's not like you can just hang it in your closet. I mean, I guess you could, but what's the point? What is the proper and best way to display it? So as I'm thinking about that, I thought, okay, it should be on a mannequin, but that seems kind of weird. Is it just going to wear the robe? And then it's like, what if you could get like ring worn robes, and then a ring worn set of trunks, and then a ring worn, like knee pads and boots, and then maybe you could, put a belt on him. And so then it was like, all right, I guess, because it just feels weird to have it on a naked mannequin. I don't know. All of this seems so weird. So I ordered an NWA, I guess they call it the 10 pounds of gold, the old school belt they used until February of 86. And I placed an order, and Dave does a great job with those. And I was delighted to have one on order. And as I'm scrolling the pictures, I see he's got a nameplate that says Ric Flair, and it says that's the actual Ric Flair nameplate from the big gold belt. And I lost my mind and thought it was the coolest thing ever. So I reached out to Dave and I said, hypothetically speaking, if that were ever for sale, I'd be a buyer. And he says, well, my friend owns it and he'll never sell it. And I said, okay, well, tell your friend this is my offer if he ever changes his mind. And 2 days later, Dave emailed me and said, "Hey, turns out never is today. I'm going to connect you." So I bought the nameplate. And so when I bought the nameplate, I then tell my friend, "Hey, man," or he says, "Hey, I did a book." His name's Dick Bourne. "I did a book on the 10 pounds of gold, and I'd love to do one on the big gold belt. If I'm ever lucky enough to get an opportunity to photograph that belt, will you loan me this nameplate back so I can take those photos?" And I said, "Yeah, and you can take them at my house." And he said, "What do you mean?" And I said, "Well, if it was this easy to get the nameplate, I'm going to go get the belt." And he's like, "Well, nobody knows where the belt is." And I go, "Well, nobody knew where the nameplate was either. So I'm going to get working." So I made my offer. I figured it out. I made my offer. I acquired the belt, and I had Dave Milliken authenticate it. And a few months later, or a few weeks later, Dick Bourne was at my house taking pictures with the belt and working on the book. And from that, I went knee deep into fandom, and it became, hey, what else can I collect? This was fun, being like the Indiana Jones to track down these collectibles. What is the next cool holy grail thing I can chase and find? And through there, I had to interface with wrestlers because wrestlers, of course, keep these. So it would become a thing like, hey, I'm going to buy, the Steiner's Michigan jackets, and I'm going to buy a TV title and the tag belts, and they're going to drive them over to me because they're in Georgia. So then they would drive over to my house and bring this stuff. And then while they're there, I'd make us lunch and we'd have a conversation and just shoot the breeze. But I got to meet like some of my childhood heroes who were now bringing me old stuff. And so it's like, hey, this is kind of fun. And through that, interview process, just hanging out at my house and making some burgers or steaks or whatever on the Big Green Egg, I'm just shooting the shit with these guys. And I realize, hey, this is content. I should be recording this. Like, this is like a modern shoot interview. This could be fun because as a tape trader, I had seen some shoot interviews and I like shoot interviews, but just never imagined I would be a participant in something like that. But anyway, it happened here, and I thought that's kind of cool. So then, fast forward, when Rick says, "Hey, will you come in and ask me fan questions?" It clicked like, "Hey, wait a minute, this is it. This is a way to get my name out there and to sell mortgages, and it'll probably introduce me to more wrestlers along the way, and I can chase down some of these fun collectibles. Man, I can kill two birds with one stone. I love this." So I went knee deep, and now I'm too far. Now Ric Flair's daughter's in the other room making me breakfast. I don't know how this happened.
Isn't that the craziest thing? Like I know that you're living it, but I it's got to be surreal to even the whole story is surreal, let alone and then you close it out with, "Oh, and she's over there doing, making me breakfast."
I mean, listen, it's crazy. And you know what's even crazier is until I do an interview like this, I don't even think about it. Like it's
Right.
just because like people ask me and that all the time. They say, "Hey, what's it like having Ric Flair as a dad?" And she's like, "I don't know." And I think people think she's being rude when she says that, but you have to appreciate she has no context of what it's like to have a regular dad. Like,
Yeah.
how would she know that Ric Flair as a dad is all she knows? So yeah, it's not even something that in our day to day life, like we think about or talk about, or, it's not like we're doing family holidays together or anything like that. So it's not part of our life.
Wow. That's so incredible. I'm glad that you got to dive in there and get that story to project that way. That's so awesome to hear. And I also want to touch on, so you do the podcast, you find the success. Where and when did you start feeling like we could make this even bigger and doing Starrcast? Because I finally got to go this past year in Texas and just be a part and be around it. And that should just be a thing all the time. Like these conventions, the nostalgia that you talked about, wrestling fans thrive off that. No matter how the current product is, they will always go back and celebrate what brought them there. And I think Starrcast does the best of all the worlds with the panels. And you walk into a room and there's a bunch of signed action figures of anybody you could think of, and the meet and greets. How did that come to be? Because I think it's one of the best things that has happened. The Starrcast, the WrestleCons, all these things.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and thank you for coming. Well, it was kind of a happy accident, and 2013, I attended my first NWA Legends Fan Fest, which was promoted by Greg Price at the University Hilton in Charlotte. And I had a blast. And what I learned was there was like a community of people who got together every single year. It was like a family reunion. Yes, they were excited to see the wrestlers. They were excited to go to the meet and greets and get their autographs and pictures. But really, it was about everybody getting together, other fans who have been coming here every year, year after year. And this is their one time a year to hang out with their wrestling buddies. And I became a part of that. And I had a great time in 2013, 2014, 2015. And I think 2016 was the last year, and or maybe 2017 was, but one of those was the last year that they were going to do it. And Greg was just going to walk away and move on, and he had grown tired of it, and that was it. And so when I realized there was a vacancy that weekend and there was an opportunity, because all of these fans, they weren't even just coming for the wrestlers, they were coming for each other. They wanted to go. So I thought, hey, here's an idea. Let's do a wrestling podcast convention. At the time, Kevin Sullivan, Jim Cornette, Eric Bischoff, obviously Bruce Pritchard, Jim Ross, Stone Cold, Colt Cabana, Chris Jericho, lots of guys had podcasts. So I thought, hey, let's just do a nonstop weekend of wrestling podcasts, and then we could break it up with some live shows. Obviously, we would have live shows, but I'm saying like some of them would be less of a podcast and more of a panel discussion, if you will. And then we could even have some like instruction. So, like if you had an opportunity to sit and learn from Tommy Young about what makes an effective referee. It's like a referee seminar. And then let Dr. Tom do something on the basic fundamentals of wrestling, and then let Ricky Morton do one on tag match psychology, and just sort of deep dives on these sort of intricate things. And I pitched it to Bruce. And Bruce and I had an early vision for what we were doing with the WWF, but let's spin up a Florida one, a Georgia one, an AWA one, a Mid South one, a Memphis one. If we could have just a variety, a whole slate of shows around every territory and just do deep dives, we thought that could be fun. And he saw the vision for that. But when I mentioned a live component and doing a convention, he thought it was nearly the dumbest thing he'd ever heard. So he said he's out, he's all the way out. And as it happened in 2017 or 2018, whatever year it was where Greg wasn't going to run, the hotel had immediately booked a wedding instead. And I think that may have actually been the reason Greg decided to move away, although he and I never talked about it. That he had lost the weekend and thought, hey, if I'm losing the weekend, I'll just shut it down and then people will be happy to see it come back. I don't know. But I knew that the hotel was not available that same weekend that I was looking for. And around that same time is when the whole Dave Meltzer, Cody Rhodes, I'll take that bet about what eventually became All In happened. And so then Cody's coming back from Wrestle Kingdom in Japan, and he's in Atlanta, an international baggage claim, head to toe in a red hoodie, a New Japan sweatsuit. And his wife's with him, and they're waiting on their bags, but they're clearly being low key, sunglasses on, hoodies on, trying to just, make their way home. And I'm an international baggage claim coming back from getting engaged to Megan in Mexico. And he texts me later and says, hey, was that you an international baggage claim? And I said, yes, sir. And I thought that was you, but I could tell you were trying to be low key. And so as we're going back and forth, I said, hey, I got an idea. And he said, shoot. And I said, technically, if you guys are going to do a big show, everybody is going to try to piggyback you like WrestleCon. You'll have a bunch of independents and you'll have conventions. But if you let me handle the convention piece with this idea I have, you would control the wrestling. There would be no other wrestling. So you wouldn't have anything to compete with, and everyone who was in town would be there to see and support your thing. And he said, that's interesting. Do you have anything on paper? And I said, I do. He said, get me something and I'll show the Bucks. So I did. I sent him 2 pages. And a few days later, he hit me back and said, hey, they love it. And they had these ideas. What if we XYZ? And before you know it, we were collaborating on what would be the very first All In and first Starrcast. And I actually was involved, and I think Cody calls them the soft goods. I helped pay for the over the budget battle royal because I agreed to buy for a certain amount of money all of the turnbuckles, the ring skirts, and the canvas, and turn them into collectibles that we sold through Starrcast. And I don't know that it made a ton of money. I mean, it did fine, but what it did for sure was, it allowed the over the budget battle royal to happen. So we had a blast, man. It was like Woodstock for wrestling, is the way Cody described it. And he and I were there putting it together from day one. And in our group chat of my wrestling friends that I used to hang out with in Charlotte, there was a guy in the group named Mark Nielsen. He was the biggest, most respected belt collector around. He had a handful of ring used, but he had literally every belt ever made in like the real version and the replica version. When I say every belt ever made, I mean he had hundreds of belts, and he helped come up with the name, combining the word podcast and Starcade, and he named it. Well, he passed away, unfortunately, and we decided to do a bunkhouse battle royale at Ric Flair's last match, and the winner would get a bronze boot. And we took a boot and we bronzed it for real, and then we had Mark's initials engraved on the side. It was like an Austin Halls type pull-on boot, sort of like Dusty wore, and there was a tab down the side at the very top, and we had Mark's initials engraved there. So when we did um, the over the top battle royale at Starrcast in his honor, or at Ric Flair's last match in his honor, we made sure the winner, Mance Warner, got the big bronze boot, but we gave his girlfriend of many, many years, and arguably the love of his life, an exact replica, because obviously I bronzed a pair of boots. So she got one and Mance got one. And it was a nice way to help celebrate and memorialize the guy who named the whole thing.
Wow. And it's so many little pieces of that story as a butterfly effect to what we're doing now and like what we're
Yes.
seeing now is so insane to me that you're like, what about this idea? Or hey, I just happen to be in the same baggage claim as Cody,
Yes.
and then I didn't say anything, and then he brings it up to you, and it's like, oh, by the way, what about this? You know,
Yes.
for that to all come together to bring Starcast and quite literally help start AEW is wild. And I love little butterfly effect moments that you don't know, you can't plan those. And it's one, the ball goes this way or that way, and it leads to a whole nother, score of the game. And for that to all happen like it did, it's pretty remarkable. So thank you for that story. And I'd like to get one more thing, piece of business, as you like to say, before we get into the rapid fire.
Sure.
Speaking of AEW, and I know you do more of the classic content, but I just want to get your where your mind is at with all this, because you lived just like I did through the Monday Night Wars. With All Out and WrestlePalooza happening last night, as we record this, how interesting is it to you personally, as someone who went through the Monday Night Wars, to see two companies at a higher level? Because AEW is probably higher of a company, in status than TNA had been even in their prime, to be competing the same day, pay-per-view against pay-per-view. WWE and WCW never did that outside of Clash and Mania 4 and Starrcade and Survivor Series 87, where the shows were on the same day. Now that seems almost commonplace. As someone who lived through all that, how do you see this going? And is it better for fans, or are fans being ridiculous, saying, separate them? Counter programming is terrible. Where do you fall on that?
I don't think it was counter programmed. I mean, if you take a look at the slate of football games that happened yesterday, respectfully, there weren't any good ones.
Yeah,
I
next
mean,
weekend's the big one.
you had Oklahoma and Auburn, but I don't even think at the beginning of the season anybody would have circled that and said that'll be a close or fun or competitive game. I think expectations were really low for Oklahoma. They far exceeded them. They actually beat Auburn, but I don't think anybody, I mean, really, that was it. I didn't even see where game day could possibly be set up. I freestyled that it might be Illinois and Indiana. It wound up being an unranked Florida team playing Miami. And I know there's enthusiasm around Miami, and that certainly sounds sexier. But I'm just saying, if you're ESPN and college football is always a bonanza for you, you took a look at September 20th and you said, well, every Saturday but this one. And they didn't have any big time competitive games yesterday at all. So I think the ESPN college football slate of games necessitated the 20th because that's what ESPN needed. And I know if you're in the wrestling bubble, you're like, well, yeah, and I hear you. But I'm just saying, if WWE would have done it next week, I mean, they don't want to be, ESPN doesn't want to have a major investment head to head with Georgia and Alabama. They just don't
No.
want to do that. So it made more sense for ESPN to roll it out on the 20th. And I know that there is some crossover between WWE fans and AEW fans. And I'm not saying that every AEW fan also watches WWE, but I'm saying that's more likely than every WWE fan also watches AEW because one is such a legacy brand that's been around for so long. And you also have just the mainstream marketing that's just built in by ESPN. I mean, ESPN was hyping it up the entire time. So I don't think we're anywhere close to the Monday Night Wars as far as um, forcing fans to pick necessarily. I don't think they have to do that like they had to back then. I do think it has greatly improved the wrestling business, and I don't think Tony Khan gets enough credit for that. I know
I
everybody
agree.
wants to point out what they perceive as been mistakes or missteps by Tony, but what I think no one spends any time on is appreciating how many jobs he's created within wrestling. Like that's a guy who loves wrestling and opens his wallet to it in a major way. I mean, he put his money where his mouth is to raise the pay scale for pro wrestling. Like, make no mistake, the reason WWE counter programs and tries to undermine AEW when they do is not because they feel threatened by AEW, but because they want to control their own pay scale. And all you have to do is take a look at the way UFC approached their MMA competitors. Whether it was Bellator or it was Elite XC or it was WEC or there were big opportunities like Affliction once upon a time acted like they were going to spend a bunch of money here, and Pride and others. In the end, UFC gobbled them all up and ran them out of town, and the fighter pay scale changed drastically as a result. And I think that is what WWE is aiming to do: is where can we go create more margin for our shareholders. And everybody knows if you want a bigger, better bottom line, you can do one of two things. You can grow your top line, which means charge you, the consumer, more for tickets, or you can reduce your costs. So, said differently, make more money or spend less. WWE is trying to actively do both. They want to cut as and mitigate as much expense as they can, which is why they're doing rights fees and sites fees. Hey, we'll bring this major event to your area for X number of dollars and a good deal. And that's the reason they're going back to Vegas. And I think their attitude is even totally different than that of a promoter. I think Vince McMahon really took a lot of pride in saying that he was sold out. He loved the way that looked on a marquee. He was big on having an ass every 18 inches. You've heard JR say that. I think on some level, the worst thing that happens in TKO offices every day is when Nick Khan finds out that a show sold out a month in advance. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but I think a guy like Nick, someone who's really trying to deliver shareholder value, probably says, hey, if the tickets sold out a month in advance, they were priced too low. We left money on the table. I want to either not sell out and we were 100 shy of a sellout, or it sells out the day of, but I want as much revenue as I can get. And the way to do that is not by hoping you can run bigger venues. The way to do that is by charging more per ticket. And that's exactly what WWE is doing right now. And AEW's business model and strategy is not like that at all. I mean, AEW, what you see a lot of the guys say in their promos, that's what they want to say. Like, it was a real collaborative effort. That doesn't exist as much in WWE. I'm not saying it doesn't totally exist, but like without even being at the pay per view this weekend, I would be willing to bet that Edge and Christian, I'm sorry, Copeland and Christian, they did all of that opening sequence where they're running into all of those Canadian fixtures backstage. I guarantee that was their idea and their execution, and they put it together. But I just don't see that being something that Tony said, "Hey, here's what we're going to do." Those guys said, "Hey, we've got an idea. Here's what we'd like to do." And I think that opportunity existing in wrestling is valuable for the boys and for the talent, but also the people behind the scenes. Like, look at all the people who work for AEW production and AEW security and AEW promotion. I mean, you're talking hundreds of jobs that have been created that respectfully, those folks, yes, some of them may be able to land a job with WWE, but that would mean WWE would let as many of those folks go off their own team. So there were real new jobs that were created, good paying jobs and opportunities thanks to Tony Khan and AEW. So I just view to look at everything in life sort of glass half full. And I'm thankful that folks like Dixie Carter and Tony Khan believed in wrestling and loved wrestling fans and the wrestling opportunity enough to invest so much of their family time, money, effort, and energy. Because I mean, let's be real. Tony probably would have made as much money just getting a standard return on investment through any other, private banker that's out there with zero stress, with zero criticism. But instead, he runs right towards it because he loves it. And I think if more people really got to know Tony Khan, the wrestling fan, his critics would be like, "Oh, I get it. He just loves wrestling like all of us, and good for him, and let's support him because he's been a value add." And so many of the people who are negative towards him or AEW just don't get that. And I feel sorry for them because they're missing the point and they're missing a great opportunity right now.
And that's where I look at the fans that will say, well, I'm not watching blank because of blank. And I'm like, well, you're missing out on potentially great stuff that you could not see on the other shows. And what pride are you holding on to for not watching one of these companies, like for one reason or the other? And you bring up Tony Khan as a fan, and I think a lot of people look at that as a criticism or a negative. And never look at it that way. I think that a lot of people are jealous that, hey, this is a wrestling fan that was at Chris Jericho's final ECW match in the ECW arena and has the money to make his own company. Why wouldn't you want to do that? I think a lot of people are jealous of that fact, and they don't, they would run it differently, or they would do this. And
Well,
I
go do
just think,
it. I mean, that's the thing. Like,
yes, go do it then.
nobody hates wrestling fans more than wrestling fans. Nobody hates wrestling more than wrestling fans. Like, the idea that you say you love something but you won't watch it, do you really love it? You're like in a cult or something, man. And let me just tell you, nobody cares. I think I've never been in a cult, but technically when you're in a cult, I think you're all supposed to love each other. You're not doing a very good job at that either. Like, just watch the fucking show. And here's what I recommend. I can be honest. I don't watch almost any wrestling live. I'll watch the PLEs live. But if I'm honest with you, I don't think I've watched an entire Dynamite or Collision or Raw or SmackDown start to finish. I may have watched one this year. I DVR them and I fast forward the stuff I don't like and I slow down for the stuff I do like. I have my taste just like you have yours, and I'm not going to dump on anybody because I know everybody's out there doing their best and trying real hard. But I have the exact same criticisms that most people online do. I don't want to use my platform and my voice, however minuscule it may be in the scheme of things, to get a sort of hive mentality around negativity. And I just don't. I mean, listen, I want what's good for wrestling. And when people are saying, "Oh, what's good for wrestling is if AEW goes out of business," play that all the way through. How is that better? Well, it's better for WWE. Okay, it might be better for WWE, the corporation. Are you a shareholder? Well, no. So you don't like the people who work in WWE? Well, no. Why would you say that? This is a fact. If AEW goes out of business, the people who work in WWE make less money. They won't feel obligated. You will eliminate any sort of leverage. This is the only game in town. They have to take it. By there being someone who can compete financially for at contract time, it improves the quality of wrestling for not just the performers but fans too. But they don't always get that, and I get that. But I'm just saying, the answer is not to say I love wrestling, but I wish there was I wish there was less of it. What? Like, how do you wrap your head around that? Like, if you really love football, you should want some of these college leagues. I mean, not these college leagues, but some of these startups like the XFL to do well. And we all know they're probably not gonna, but why not try? I mean, just the idea of saying, no, it's going to fail. I'm not even going to invest in it. But there's a lot of your favorite players who can no longer get a roster spot in the NFL, and this gives them an opportunity. So if you really care about the people who are in this sport you say you love, I don't know. Seems like maybe you change your tone a little, but not everybody does that.
I'm just glad that you said the line that pro wrestling fans hate pro wrestling more than anybody else. Like,
nobody hates wrestling more than wrestling fans. Nobody.
It's so true. It's like people hate watch, or like, again, why are you putting yourself through that then if you don't like it so much? What are you enjoying out of it? You do it the best, seemingly. Let's DVR it, and oh, I don't like this. I'll just fast forward through it. We wish we had that back in the day. Another NWO promo. You could have fast forwarded through that.
You know, the thing too is, it's like, you know, I got a ton of criticism for Ric Flair's last match, and I'm fine with it. I knew that would happen, and that's all cool. But I'm just saying, the people who are like, oh, I wish it would have never happened. I didn't like everything on it, so therefore I wish it would have never happened. Man, do you know how many people got breaks because of that show? How many people got paydays because of that show? Like, when you're critical of everything and you do nothing, why don't you just take a seat and shut your fucking mouth? Like, the reality is, try to be positive. I mean, the people who are being so critical, have they created anything of value for anyone at all to contribute to this space? Like, you say you love it, but have you tried to help in any way to try to build or develop or position anything? Have you done anything at all? And the answer is usually not. I mean, these are background players, sideline players, people who are never going to put themselves out there, people who are never going to try anything. And I don't pay any attention to that at all, which is why their criticism, I mean, like, I would have to care what you think in order, I'd have to care about your opinion and value your opinion for me to care what you think. And your opinion of me is none of my business. And I don't care. I want you to be happy and do what you like. But like, you're so obsessed about sharing, well, I don't like this. Hey, bud, nobody asked you what you thought. Watch it or don't. And they don't care. They, you know, my buddy Dave Milliken says, some days they hate me, some days they love me, both days I got paid. That's the way you have to be in wrestling, because as Jeff Jarrett always says, wrestling is subjective. You know, it works until it doesn't work. And you're always out there trying things. But the people who never try anything seem to always have the answer. Yeah, I have no track record. Like, we're not interested in hearing what you would do. How about you tell us what you did do? And if the answer is nothing, just hush and watch the show. I mean, the level of fandom is so great about pro wrestling, and that's what I love most about it. But like, I was fanatical about The Sopranos, and never once did I look and see what the fucking ratings were. I don't care. Hey, less people are watching now. All right. What am I supposed to do with that information? As a
Sopranos are
fan,
going in the tank.
now that I know, I guess I was wrong, because I liked the show, but it didn't get good ratings, so it must not be good. Like, so what does that matter? I mean, are you a shareholder in AEW? Are you losing money? No, but I'm just saying it's dying. Okay. Now what? Well, I just wanted you to know it's dying. All right, we got that. Anything else? No, that's it. It's like, where do we go from here? Like, do you have any ideas? Like, that's what I would much rather hear is the ideas. Like I saw a fair criticism, not even a criticism, but a suggestion. And I think it was from Ibu online. And he said, hey, that was another great title defense for Mercedes Monet, but I'm still waiting for her to sink her teeth into a juicy storyline that can help define her character. Hey, that's a fair criticism. Hey, she has great matches, but I'm waiting on the big story. And we know what we're talking about. Tony had a fantastic story with Mariah May, and it was a really long story that we all got excited about. And respectfully, Mercedes hasn't had that yet. We know she can have great matches, but we're ready for that. I thought that was a fair criticism. as opposed to LOL, Mercedes wins, big surprise, who cares? It's like, wait, was the match good? Oh, the match was good, but there was no story. Yeah, but you didn't say that. So I like when Ibu says, hey, we need a juicy storyline for her. Hey, that's a fair criticism. We can actually do something with that. But just, oh, it sucks, LOL. Man,
It's
what?
lazy.
Well, not only is it lazy, but like everything in life on some level sucks, bud. There's something about your house you don't like. There's something about your car you don't like. There's something about your dog you don't like. There's something about your fucking refrigerator you don't like. But when we're focusing on that one thing, it's like I choose to focus on the positive. But if I am going to be negative, I like to have some sort of context of. So I was really happy when Ibu said, I'd like to see a big storyline for Mercedes. Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's do that. Let's find her one because I do think that is something we could develop more is a good story for her.
Because there's allowed, like, criticisms are allowed from anyone, but the
Yes.
criticisms don't hold as much weight when it's purely for criticism's sake. If you say, well, this was good, but what if we did this? It's an extension, it's an olive branch. It's what can we do? Because I always tell people with pro wrestling, of course, and I did love that you said that, Jarrett, pro wrestling is subjective. It is. It's not only subjective, but it's also never ending. There's always, like, there's two pay-per-views last night, but there's going to be Raw on Monday. There's going to be Dynamite on Wednesday. Like, it can't just stop. So you have to go, well, this was good at the show, the big show, but what are we going to do after that? How do we progress to the next big show? And if you're just saying, well, it sucks, okay, if you were running the company, then the company would die because you would just give up after you thought something was terrible instead of actually putting forth effort to an idea for the future, because the business doesn't stop like that. It always is going.
I always say in business, whenever I have, and I've used this for a long time because I love this, but I think it applies to wrestling too. Complaining isn't a strategy. Like we're not going to be able to complain our way to a solution. We're not going to complain our way to a happy place. Like that's not a strategy. So one of the things I learned from my IT guy, his name was Luke, and he was with me for a long, long time. And my nickname for him was Ninja Luke because it felt like any sort of problem I had, I couldn't stump him. It didn't matter if it was a damn arcade machine; he could figure it out. And one of the things that Luke would say, and that was frustrating for him working in IT, is when people would sort of throw their hands up at any slight inconvenience. And the phrase he used that I borrow sometimes is, hey, I've tried nothing and I'm all out of ideas. And it's like, that's the answer. Like, if you can, all right, it's one thing if you're going to say, hey, here's my problem with AEW. Great. Now, what is a solution? Do you have a better idea? Because just saying this sucks, LOL, that ain't it. Like, yes, Ric Flair's last match, the actual match, is not what he wanted or we wanted. That wasn't the practice match we had 5 or 6 times. That was super fun and compelling. But did you watch the rest of the card? The rest of the card was loaded with guys you see all over TV right now who are doing better than ever right now. And Ric Flair's last match was supposed to be a springboard for, hey, here's what we're going to celebrate what wrestling was, but now we're going to show you in the undercard where wrestling is going to be. And you want to look at a star-studded lineup, go look at that undercard. Everybody wants to shit on Rick. Look at the undercard. So listen, I know I get there's criticism. Oh, he shouldn't have had the match at all. LOL. Got it. But are you saying take away the opportunity from all those other guys who were on the show? Like that was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I just hope that people will, try to change their viewing habits as far as are you watching it with a critical eye or are you watching it the way it's intended? Because I'll be honest, years ago, I was watching with my daughter and not Mercedes, Naomi came out and she had put LEDs all over the belt and the belt was glowing with these neon lights. And then my internal dialogue was, this is fucking stupid. I can't believe she's done that to a belt. I'm a belt nerd and this is sacrilegious. She shouldn't be doing this. This is awful. I didn't say any of that. And the first thing that said in my house at the time was my daughter saying, Dad, look at that. Isn't that so cool? I love her belt. I want one just like that. And it clicked for me. It was like, oh, that just wasn't for me. Like I could relate and think back as a kid. I bet when my dad first saw the $1 million belt, He thought this is the dumbest. It's a dollar sign, son. Those aren't real diamonds. This is hokey. He's not Scrooge McDuck. What is this? This is so stupid. But he didn't say that, and he didn't ruin it for me. And I, as a little kid, thought the $1,000,000 belt was objectively the coolest thing of all time. Now, as an adult, I can say, boy, that is some cheesy shit. Who would ever wear that? This is silly. But as a kid, man, it hit for me. So when I saw that for my daughter, it was like, oh, I got it. That segment's not for me, it's for her. And when you really understand the wrestling show is a variety show, you'll appreciate it differently. Like, oh, well, that they're supposed to have something for everybody, and that's for them. And that's what you want in wrestling. You want it to be an inclusive space where, everybody can find representation and all that, which is why I've always, supported that, because from that moment on, I realized wrestling should not just be catered to what a guy in his mid 30s at the time, thinks is cool. They need to get little girls engaged too. And she loves it. So we need more of that.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's all about perspective. It's always going to be, maybe something you like, maybe something you don't. It's a buffet, but that's the best part. Give me something that I do love, or something that I can look back and be like, wow, I didn't expect this to be good, but I was shocked that it was so good. And you can hook new fans that way. And it's all about the process of a show to garner new fans, keep the same fans happy, and turn the negative into a positive. And again, then you do it again next week. And it's the beauty of pro wrestling. But as you've brought up, there definitely can be the detractors that are very empty in their criticisms of LOL, this sucks, because I see that all the time, and it just doesn't help anybody. And it doesn't help your case as, a fan of pro wrestling, to just blow it off like that. Like,
Yes.
you're not helping anything. In fact, you're making yourself look worse, and making the collective of wrestling fans look down upon by other, entities in the entertainment world. That's why for a long time, it's so funny, because like Colin Cowherd would make fun of pro wrestling fans, and now it's on ESPN. Like, look what happens. Like, things progress, people turn their head around to it, and maybe they gain a fan or two down the line. You just never know, but you can't get there if you just dismiss it from the start. So,
Agree.
man, something else I agree with has been so wonderful to talk to you, Conrad. I've been waiting to do this for a very long time, and I'm thrilled that we finally got to do it. I want to close out this with what I always like to do with someone I'm getting to talk to for the first time, and it's rapid fire, kind of a quick free association, where I'm going to give you a quick topic and just give me the first thing that comes to your mind, or answer it to the best of your abilities. Are you ready for that?
I'm ready.
All right. And now some of these, specifically for you, might be easier to answer than others, but that's why I got a few of them in here. So let's get things going. Hogan or Flair?
Hogan.
Favorite era of The Undertaker?
American Badass.
Would you be interested in Rock Cena 3?
No.
Pay-per-views on Saturdays or Sundays?
Saturday afternoons.
Favorite WrestleMania for you?
WrestleMania 5.
Shawn versus Undertaker at Mania 25 or 26?
25.
Favorite face of Foley?
Mankind. Cactus Jack.
Favorite match of the first 9 WrestleManias, but you can't choose a Hogan or Savage match?
That's interesting.
It's a thinker for sure.
Yeah, I don't even know what to pick. Let me look up the cards,
Sure.
because they're both in most of them. So I'm not even going to pretend to look at anything until 4. No, I'll look at 5. Man, not a lot of good ones on there as a single. Let's look at 6 because I think 6 had some decent stuff.
Yeah, I think 6 and 7, even 8 started to have some good stuff.
Oh, yeah. 8's got a great one. I don't even have to look anymore because you had Piper and Brett.
There
So
you go.
Piper and Brett at 8. That'll do it.
Yeah, I love that you got a thinker in there because as someone, I pride myself in the history of pro wrestling, and I like being able to do the same, like ask a question that I would find fascinating. So I'm glad that
Yeah.
you've
Yeah.
got the.
I had to think about that one for sure.
Where do you see the future of WWE's classic content? YouTube or something else?
YouTube.
I go ahead.
I think YouTube is right now it's the world's second biggest search engine behind Google, but I think it will introduce more lapsed fans. Like rather than put all that stuff behind the paywall, what WWE makes their biggest money for is the current content today. But the easiest way to get people engaged in the current content today is to make them remember why they watched in the first place and show them the things they fell in love with originally. I can't tell you how many times Bruce and I would do live shows and that we would hear from people when we met them in person. Hey, I hadn't watched wrestling in years, but I found your podcast and now I don't miss a Monday Night Raw. Like they fell in love with the nostalgia again and then embraced the current stuff. And I think that is why YouTube is the best use of that for me.
And I also say that not only is it open to everybody, but there's comments and like you could see what other people are saying about it. And there's videos I always check I always sort by popular on the WCW one just to see like what's gotten the most clicks. And some of the stuff that you would never expect to get the highest level of traffic are there. And it's pretty wild to see what people are more interested in. Like if it's a match with Goldberg, people might be interested in it, but then you go on Twitter and you see the discourse of like, oh, Goldberg, was terrible. And it's like, but was he like, did he move the needle? Did he put asses in the seats? And you can see that as classic content, a match with him at the top of the board. So being able to gauge that on a platform like YouTube is something you don't have with a WWE network even, or a
Yes.
Peacock or whatever. Brett or Sean?
Mm. That's tough because my favorite match of all time is a Bret Hart match with Bret and Stone Cold at WrestleMania 13. But I just think about how many incredible matches that Shawn had through the years. I mean, the ladder match with Razor, the Hell in a Cell with Undertaker, those are the match with Mick Foley. Those are about as good as it gets. But God, I'm gonna go Bret.
All right. Favorite WCW pay per view for you?
Halloween Havoc 96.
That's an interesting choice, but I like that choice a lot. Had Vader not left WCW, what match would you have liked to have seen most? To maybe help guide you, there were rumors that he would face Ming and then the Giant later on in 95. So those are on the table.
Yeah, I mean the Giant in 95 or 96 before he got even bigger would have been really fun and impressive, but I don't know. I mean, that would have been a fun spectacle, but I think the better match would have been him bullying someone and then fighting from underneath. So I'm going to give you an answer that won't be popular, but I'm going to say Chris Benoit.
Oh my God. That, I mean, it's that you're right, though. I didn't really think about that.
I'm just thinking, you need him to bully someone and then fight back and it somehow be believable. And I think him trying to do a German and I don't think he could have, but him doing a body slam with a smaller frame, I just think it could have helped elevate him in a big way. I was also thinking not necessarily that this would have been, an incredible match, but if you have him as this unbelievable bully monster, him taking a diamond cutter and beating Vader would have really cemented Vader. So, and I even think a guy like Booker T, think about how he could have really been cemented if he somehow came out the other side and beat this big, mean, nasty white rhino. So, and no, I guess I'll say even in that order, Benoit, then DDP, then Booker T, because I think Vader could have really helped make all of those guys. Respectfully, I don't think Scott Hall needed it. I don't think Kevin Nash needed it. We had seen him and Randy. We had seen him and Sting. We had seen him and Foley. So yeah, I'll go Chris Benoit because I mean, you get to a place where you're like, hey, I can't even buy into that with Rey Mysterio,
Right.
and I think it would have been too much of a styles clash with like a La Parka. But who
Yeah.
could make that baby face comeback? And I know that, part of me thinks even a Chris Jericho could have done it. I'm sure he could have. But I just think the nerd in me wants to see Chris Benoit fight back against Vader.
You put it perfectly of like the believability of both of those guys is
Yes.
why you want to watch those matches. It's like it never looks like it's fake. It's always so damn real, for better or worse. All right, 3 more here. What happened to the big gold? And I'm referring to the dent at the top. I've always been curious, and you being the belt savant that you are, I feel like it's between Bash at the Beach 94 and World War III of the next year where we saw it for the first time. Do you know what happened?
Nobody knows what happened, but it happened in 87.
Really?
Like you can go back and you can see where it's there at some point in 87, and I'll forget, but I had it nailed down. I was watching old tapes when I first got it. I saw it late 2013 or at some point in 2014, probably late 2013. I was going through episodically episodes of TV, and I jumped. It's like from 86, I jumped to 89, and it was there. So I went to 88, and it was there. So I think I nailed it down to like the fall of 87. I could be wrong on that, but I do remember it being some point in 87. But I'm inclined to believe that it was just dropped. You got to remember that. They're not taking wrestling fans when they hold these belts. They hold it with like kit gloves. They're very careful. But wrestlers, let's remember they're hitting people with it. They're throwing it on the timekeeper's table. They're throwing it outside the ring so they don't get caught with it. It's a prop, it's a storytelling device. And when it slides off of that and it hits just bare concrete, now you're talking about metal colliding with concrete. I think it just fell straight down and bent on impact. And I
Do you
know
think
there's
it
lots of silly rumors that Giant bent it with his hands. Not true. I just think it was from either travel and being dropped, or more than likely in a wrestling context, or maybe at the bar. It was dropped and it hit a tile floor or a concrete floor and it bent.
do you think it bent initially and then got worse? Or do you think it stayed the same pretty much?
That's hard for me to say, but I mean, I could. I mean, there may be a few degrees. You may be onto there something there, but I think it got more prominent as we got more familiar with it and as the leather started to mold with it. So it was on its
True.
original leather from 86 to 99, and they re-leathered it in 99, I think August or September. And it came off of the original cherry wood type color, and it wound up being redone and not the most beautiful leather work you ever saw by a movie studio, AFX Studios. It was an effects company that did movies and production and stuff like that. And they just said, "Hey, we'll make a cast copy and we'll make another strip of leather for it." But the original guys who did it, they were high end saddle makers, so there was a lot of attention to detail with stitching and things like that because those guys were real craftsmen versus the effects company who's like, we just need something fast that looks good on camera. So it's a totally
Right.
different approach. So not being critical of his work, like one is just, I mean, I don't know if you've ever seen, but like if you see somebody who like had a castle on a set, usually that's just styrofoam that they've painted gray. So it's
True.
portable,
Yeah.
but it looks like that. But like if you were to look at it, you would say, "Oh, well, this thing could be damaged very easily." Yeah, of course. We just need it for this one shoot. It's fucking styrofoam. So the effects people, that's their approach. We need it to look good, and we need it to be affordable, and we need it to be light and easy to move. Like those are the objectives. But if you talk to a guy who like sells $50,000 saddles, then he's going to be very meticulous with every stitch and every cut, and he's going to have much more purpose because he's charging for that.
Sure.
But on an effects company, it's usually, hey, we need as much as we can get as affordably as we can get to make this budget work. So it's just a totally different approach to how you create those things.
You're telling me the Dungeon of Doom wasn't a real stone set?
There you go.
I do want to add one quick one to the belts. Who's your favorite wrestler to hold the 91 to 93 WCW title design? That's your Simmons, Luger, Vader, Flair, Sting. Who do you think it looks best on?
Well, I mean, don't get me wrong. It's really cool from a historical perspective because there's only a handful of belts that Ric Flair held. You know, the 10 pounds of gold, the big gold, that WCW, we'll call it the Luger belt. And then, you know, the one version of the all gold winged eagle. So he physically only held four titles. And, you know, WWE owns the winged eagle and Triple H owns the Dome Globe. So they have two of them, and I had two of them, and so it's interesting to think that, you know, as far as, you know, this is the greatest wrestler of all time and 16-time champion and blah blah blah. There's really only four physical representations of that. I think that belt is probably most synonymous and most famous, though, the one you're referencing, because of Ron Simmons.
Yeah.
Ron Simmons made real, actual, important wrestling history, becoming the first black heavyweight champion. But I think just physically, who did the belt look best on? I think it looked best around the waist of Lex Luger.
Wow, that's my favorite belt design. I feel like I've tweeted out the little coin that I have that is representing that championship that was given out to some execs, I think, with TBS, and I've seen them float around on eBay. That design, I feel like a lot of people don't give it any credit, and I just think it's a unique design, and it was such a small window of time that it was there. Because as soon as Hogan got there, it was like, all right, this big gold one is what we want to run with, and like I would have loved to have seen Vader hold the big gold. I think that would have been incredible to see. Or like the Giant holding the Luger belt. Like that would have been interesting to see. So it's this tiny frame of time there, but I always felt that that was my favorite design to look at, underrated if you will. So two more. Oh, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Nope.
Okay, two more. Favorite Ric Flair match.
You know, that changes every now and again. But I usually say that my favorite match is him and Terry Funk from Clash of the Champions, New York Knockout, the I Quit match from Troy, New York. I just recently showed that to a friend of mine who wasn't really familiar with Terry Funk. So that's probably it. But I also really love the story and just the entire thread of Starrcade 93. And that
Oh
was
yeah,
such an accident. You know, Flair wasn't even supposed to be there. It was supposed to be Sid versus Vader.
yeah.
But when Sid goes out and they're in Charlotte and it's the 10-year anniversary, they sort of backed into the best possible story of him overcoming that. Just think that story is about pitch perfect what wrestling could be and should be. But if you're just looking for, you know, the best actual match and not necessarily that fighting, brawling style that both Funk and Vader had in their matches with Flair, I would go back to the 89 trilogy that everybody talks about with Steamboat. And he would probably pick Chicago and I might pick Nashville. But I don't
Yeah.
think anybody picks New Orleans, which once upon a time that was my favorite of the three because it was so different. But it's probably Nashville for me. And how fun is it to think that that match is the same building that we held Ric Flair's last match in? So, like the last Clash of the Champions was in Municipal Auditorium. The last of that trilogy with Steamboat, where he really starts things with Funk, that's in that same building, Municipal in Nashville. And then Ric Flair's last match, like as crazy as it sounds, we had more fans at Ric Flair's last match than we did at either of those two. And I just think
Wow.
that's just fascinating to think about.
It is, and a couple things. The Terry Funk from that Clash of the Champions is finally got immortalized in action figure form recently. They came out with the blue one, but they also came out with the red version, which has the gray tights from that I Quit match. So that's
Who put that out?
Mattel.
I'm looking that up now.
Yeah, I think the one from New York Knockout is the Chase, so it's the tougher one to find. But I got one off of eBay because I was like, this is the outfit that if I think of Terry Funk, this is the one I want to have represented the most. But I also think I'm more partial to maybe some of his later. I mean, the Vader match is amazing, but I really like his match with Arn at Fall Brawl '95.
Oh yeah, that was fun.
Because that was like never supposed to happen. They were never going to have a match. Like you never thought that we would actually do it. And leading up to it with the Halloween Havoc thing afterwards, with him turning on Sting and them getting the Horsemen back together. I always like the late '95, early Nitro stuff between those guys. So,
hey, dude, I'm looking up the pictures of this Terry Funk Chase. Man, what a great! Thanks for telling. I didn't even know that existed until you just told me. This is awesome. Thanks for that.
absolutely, yeah. I used to be big into figures, and then just stopped. You grow out of it. You brought up phases before, because my thing now is the WCW pay-per-view shirts. Trying to get every one from '90 to '01, a shirt from every event, pay-per-view wise. But the figures that they make now are so damn good and are so incredibly detailed, and they go everywhere. Like they just came out with the I Am Not a Shark John Tenta as like a chase. So like they're going to the depths of everything to make these unique characters. So whenever you see something like the Terry Funk represented from that show, you gotta jump on it.
Absolutely, that's cool.
And I got one more for you. You might have answered it already with your favorite match, but I'll let you pivot if you want. One match to show to non-wrestling fans.
Oh, I just did this. I showed him. It was my buddy Jamie from the office. He's not a wrestling fan, and I showed him Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio from Halloween Havoc '97. That's the one, and I did show him two more. Well, three more, I guess. I showed him IWA King of the Death match with Mick Foley and Terry Funk. And then I showed him the New York Knockout with Terry Funk and Ric Flair. But I also showed him, now that I'm thinking about it, Mike Awesome and Masato Tanaka from One Night Stand 2005.
Oh,
So he saw just a variety of car crash wrestling. And, but the one that if I had to just pick one, it's Ray and Eddie from
yeah.
Halloween Havoc '97.
It's so wild that that match has transcended. Like, when cruiserweights first became a thing with WCW, a lot of people might have overlooked them, and then they became the opener instead of Johnny B. Bad, and they became a really cool thing. And then you get people now think that match is number one of all time, and at least for WCW circles. And back to figures, they are going to release an ultimate of that Rey Mysterio, and he has the necklace of the other mask that he had
Oh,
just
that's
in
cool.
case.
That's very cool.
Yeah. So speaking of very cool, to transition lamely out of that, this has been wonderful, man. I've had such a thrill talking to you.
Oh, me
And
too, man.
thank you. And honestly, this is why I wanted to do it. Is you're a guy that I can see a lot of myself as a wrestling fan with how you carry yourself as a wrestling fan, where you love the nostalgia, as a lot of us do, but the care and wanting to go back, and you're getting to talk to all these different people throughout wrestling's history and telling their story that maybe they had a shoot interview or two, but you're getting every pay-per-view that, all these different things. And it's honestly just BSing with another wrestling fan. And that's all I want to kind of give back to the pro wrestling community. Is I'm just another fan, and I love hearing from other fans that have, grew up to be even bigger than just a fan. You're fully ensconced in the business of the pro wrestling business. So I really appreciate you coming on, man. And where can everybody find you, and what are you doing now?
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and thank you for being so patient with me. I know this has been a long time coming, and we aimed to do this last month, and life got in the way for me. So thank you for your patience. But I had a delight catching up with you today. It's always an honor to be asked, and I would love to chat with anybody listening who has been thinking about, is now the time to buy or refinance or get out of debt. Like I'm routinely having conversations with some of my podcast listeners who are kind of struggling month to month right now. They feel like they've got what we might call golden handcuffs on, because they've got a really great rate on their mortgage they don't want to let go, but they find themselves struggling to just keep up with all of their other expenses. Not necessarily the mortgage, but a car payment that seems like it's gotten away from them, or credit cards that they now feel stuck paying minimum payments on. The answer to that has been hiding in your house this whole time. It was not in your attic or your basement or your junk drawer in your kitchen that we all have. It's in the equity in your house. You know, if you bought your house prior to 2020, your house is probably worth a whole heck of a lot more now than it used to be. And you can leverage that equity to make your life easier. And I know some people say, oh, well, I don't want to let go of my really great rate. I hear you, but if you're really rate conscious, respectfully, you might not have ran up a bunch of credit card debt. So let's find a way, now that we own the money, how do we mathematically get out of this as smartly as possible? What I mean is, let's get the best possible rate with the greatest possible tax deduction and see how we can keep more of our own money. And I'm routinely helping our listeners who are drowning in credit card debt, but have a great mortgage rate on their first mortgage, pay their house off faster and do it with cheaper monthly payments. And how I do it is I just combine all of their other debt and we do like a household monthly budget. We see what's coming in and what's going out. And then my goal is to create more money at the end of the month. I want to make your life a little easier. So what we wind up doing is paying off people's credit cards, also consolidating your other mortgage, giving you a break from house payments for 2 months. And in 2 months, your credit scores will be through the roof because you will have paid off all of your credit card debt. Now you've got access to that in case of emergencies. And that really is the only time I advise using credit cards is for emergencies. If you use one at all, pay it off every month at the end of the billing cycle. That's always my best practice. But if that's not something you're able to do right now, let's hit the reset button. And more importantly, let's cut years off of your loan. Like, for instance, if you're 5 years into a 30-year loan, that means you've got 25 years left. But if I could combine all of your debt and put you into a 15-year mortgage where once upon a time you thought, well, I can't afford that. And if you were looking at it strictly from just a house payment standpoint, that's correct. Maybe you couldn't afford it. But what if we get rid of all the other debt? My point is, you're spending that money every month. Why not channel it into the cheapest rate with the greatest tax deduction? Because the interest you pay on a credit card is not tax deductible. So not only is the rate really, really high, but you can't write off the interest. On a mortgage, the rate will be much cheaper and you can write off the interest. But if we knock out the credit card debt and we reduce the term, so instead of having 25 years left, you pay your house off 10 years faster, we can still do that with cheaper monthly payments. I do it every single day. I talk to one of my clients who has existing credit card debt. And if that sounds like you, let me run the numbers for you. There's no cost, no obligation. Here's the worst case scenario. You spend 10 minutes with me and my team and we say, hey man, you got a pretty good deal. Keep doing what you've been doing. That's the worst case. But what if we could save you $1,000 a month? What if we could show you how to pay your house off 10 years faster without changing your monthly budget? We've done it for thousands of families and we can do it for you too right now. Go find out how easy it is at savewithconrad.com or give us a call toll free at 888-425-0105 or just email me directly, Conrad@savewithconrad.com.
Wow. You're a machine, Conrad. You're an absolute machine.
I don't know about that, man, but I appreciate the opportunity to come on and chat with you and talk about wrestling and talk about my life. This was an interview, the type that I haven't really done a lot of. So I really appreciate the opportunity to use your platform and share some of my story today. It means a lot. Thank you for that.
And it means a lot for you showing up and being here to talk here on the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. That's Conrad Thompson. I'm Juice Springsteen, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this very special Sip Series episode with Conrad Thompson. Be sure to, subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and tune in next week for another edition of the Juice Box. That was the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. Make sure to subscribe to the Juice Box wherever you listen to podcasts.